If you grew up watching Adult Swim, the guy who created your entire childhood was completely screwed out of his legacy by Cartoon Network, and he works as an Amazon driver now, and the story just gets way more messed up from there. Since Adult Swim launched in 2001, it's been a cultural juggernaut, defining many people's childhoods, but its origins date back all the way to 1994, and none of it would have been possible without a man named Andy Merrill. At the time, Cartoon Network was a brand new cable station, having just launched in 1992 and relying heavily on playing reruns of old cartoon libraries that their parent company Turner Broadcasting owned. But in 1994, they wanted to get into original programming, and so two lower-level employees named Andy Merrill and Mike Lazzo co-created a show called Space Ghost Coast to Coast. The concept of the show was that they took animation cells that the company owned from a Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 60s called Space Ghost and repurposed them to make a new show where Space Ghost was the host of a talk show, and he would interview real-life celebrities and do a bunch of zany gags. Andy Merrill co-created the show, as well as voicing Space Ghost in the first couple of episodes before being replaced by George Lowe, and also most famously was the voice of Brack. It was a hit for Cartoon Network. It was so successful that the show's other co-creator, Mike Lazzo, was made the executive vice president of programming for Cartoon Network, and his production company, Ghost Planet Industries, which was eventually retitled to William Street, became the de facto production arm for the station. They went on to produce several spin-offs of Space Ghost Coast to Coast with a similar style and humor, such as C-Lab 2021, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, and The Brack Show, which Andy Merrill co-created and starred in. These shows were all run together in an unannounced block in the early hours of the morning in December of 2000 as a test run, but then were brought together into a permanent late-night block of programming called Adult Swim in September of 2001. In fact, you might not remember this, but Adult Swim premiered on September 2nd of 2001, only 9 days before 9/11. But despite having co-created the show that started this entire empire and directing and co-creating several of the other shows that aired on Adult Swim, Andy Merrill was never elevated to executive status like his friend Mike Lazzo, and stayed in lower-level programming and voice acting positions for years at the company. Merrill left Cartoon Network in 2013, likely due to layoffs, though it's unclear, never having been given any proper ownership, credit, or most importantly, royalties for any of these shows that he helped create and this empire that he helped build. He was forced to start driving as an Amazon delivery person to make ends meet. He also supplements his income with occasional convention appearances and some voiceover work. This all came to light in 2024 when somebody on Twitter made a post about the 30th anniversary of Space Ghost Coast to Coast, to which Andy Merrill quote tweeted the post and responded by saying, "If you would have told me 30 years ago that today I would be at the bottomest, rockiest rung of the rock bottom ladder, I wouldn't have believed you." And he's actually on this app and posts all the time. I'm not going to tag him because that feels kind of weird, but if you look up his name, you can find him. However, we should all show some respect for the guy who literally created our childhoods. And real quick, if you like my videos and you want to see more in-depth writing from me, you can do that here.